Hello, this is day 4 of Unit 2, Revolutionary Ideas, and the revolutionary idea for today is industrialism. So, the first question is, how did inventions like the seed drill change agriculture? Inventions like the seed drill changed agriculture because it meant that there would be better farming. Before they had the seed drill, farmers would have to throw the seeds out in a broadcasting method. This broadcasting method would toss the seeds out on the dirt flat. And the ancient saying was that you'd have to sow 4 seeds for every one that you wanted to grow, or sow 4 seeds as you make your row, 1 to rot and 1 to grow, 1 for the pigeon and 1 for the crow. The seed drill, though, made farming more productive. It meant that of all the seeds that you planted, most of them would actually germinate. And so you have here an area that sort of cuts a furrow. This funnel gets full of seeds that get dropped into the furrow. This little thing sort of smushes the dirt on top of it. And as you go along, basically, every seed can be guaranteed the exact right depth in the ground. Today, we use almost the exact same technology dragged behind a tractor, and you can do multiple furrows at the same time. This changed agriculture because in the 1700s, this increased the production of wheat by 25%, and the 1800s by 50% again. This means that more food could be gotten out of each acre. It meant that less work was required for each acre of food, and it meant that more farmers, more people had free time, and more people were able to have access to cheaper food. This meant that there was a migration of people from the countryside into the cities. People who used to be farmers would need new jobs. It also meant that more people could purchase food that fewer people were growing. In the same time, not related to the seed drill, but at the same time, there were also improvements in the breeding of animals so that the size of the average sheep increased by 25% as well. So these new inventions and these new ways of thinking changed agriculture, making it more productive and easier to do. Question number 2. Why did industrialism happen in England and not in other places? England is this little tiny island way up in the north. So why would all of this start there? First, I want to look at a few vocabulary words. Industrialism is where industries, a business where a lot of the same kind of work is done, are placed in one location. So this is a manufactory, one of the first manufactories in the world. And a manufactory is a place where a lot of things are made by a lot of people. And this was later shortened to just the word factory, where, and we still say this, manufacturing is happening. The word comes from mano, for hands, and factory as in factors of production. And that gives us a hint as to why England did so well. England has all of the factors of production. They have the labor that we just saw in the previous slide, surplus workers from the countryside, surplus agricultural workers looking for new jobs could work in the factories. The land, we're not so much talking about like the agricultural land now, we're talking about the resources the land can provide. This map shows us the gray areas are where there's coal deposits. Some of these big dots are areas where there is iron, and also England also has lots of copper and tin and lead and other resources that help with manufacturing. England is also full of easily navigable rivers, and they also built a network of canals. These canals and the rivers were able to connect up a variety of locations to the ports, and as England is mostly an island, it was easy to import and export things on ships. You combine all these things together into one manufactory, the land and the labor, and the capital, which is provided by the colonies and the slave labor in those colonies. You have industrialization. The next question is, how did inventions encourage other inventions? And lots of students ask this, right? Why, when one thing is invented, does it seem like there's an avalanche of inventions to follow up? So this is one of those chains of events. The spinning wheel had been used for hundreds of years to make thread. But then in 1733, a machinist named John Kay created a faster way to do the weaving of the thread into cloth. Instead of weaving in a slow hand process, now John Kay invented the flying shuttle. This was a shuttle for the weaving that made the shuttle fly back and forth on wheels, and it made the process faster. But of course, this meant that the spinning couldn't keep pace with the fast production of weaving. This brings in 1764, a textile worker named James Hargreaves, who invents a spinning wheel that he names after his daughter, Jenny. The spinning Jenny can spin multiple threads at the same time and is hand operated with a crank. This inspires the development by Samuel Crompton in 1779 of the spinning mule, which adds power to the spinning Jenny. And so he called it a mule because it was a hybrid of a powered machine and a spinning Jenny. This machine could spin hundreds or maybe even thousands of spools of thread at the same time. Now that we have access to speedy production of thread, we need a speedier loom. We now, in the 1787, Edmund Cartwright develops the power loom, which is a loom that is powered. So we have a powered spinning device, we have a powered loom, and we've come quite a ways from the hand spinning and hand loom of 100 years earlier. This video is not part of this lecture, but if there is time, you should find this link and watch this video on your own time. And it explains the life of the actions of a mule scavenger, this job down underneath the machines. And it gives you a sense of what these machines were like when they were in action. The next question is, how did steam engines change the amount of work people could do? And the short answer is they made it so that people could do more work. This guy here, James Watt, an inventor, invented a steam engine that was efficient enough for people to actually want to use it. Before he invented his steam engine, most things were powered by people or by animals, and a few things were powered by water wheels if you were fortunate enough to be located near a river. This engine, for example, was horse-powered, and this type of thing was relatively common in the era before steam power. These horses are hooked up to a bar that is hooked up to a bar up here, which is hooked to this wheel, which turns on this axle, and this, through these teeth, turns this wheel, which turns this wheel, which then raises this basket. You could lift heavy things from a mine, you could lift water from a well using horse power. But James Watt's steam engine, which was powered by burning coal, could get you such high amounts of power as up to the power of 5 horses in a single engine. And we would call that 5 horsepower. Why are these engines better than using people or horses? Well, engines that are powered by steam don't need to rest. They don't need to sleep. They don't need to eat. They don't get injured. They don't get sad. They don't mind if it's raining. They don't mind if there's thunder and lightning. They are powered by coal and water, but luckily England has seemingly unlimited amounts of coal available for virtually free. So the steam engines mean that now people can do 5 times as much work with a machine the same size. And over time, these machines are made more and more efficient, so you can get hundreds of horsepower for 0 horses. The last slide for today is, why did industrialism happen in the 1750s? Why didn't it happen earlier? Why didn't it happen later? And so many students have asked this question. The short answer is that industrialism did not happen earlier because Europeans were preoccupied with war for most of their history until the late 1700s. All the way into the late 1700s, they were preoccupied with wars such as like the 7 Years' War that you're probably familiar with, that engulfed most of the world. France, Britain, Spain, Portugal, the Dutch, all these European powers were fighting each other in North America, in the Caribbean, in India, and you know those stories from your other history classes. England had a revolution where they cut off their king's head. That meant that politically they were a little bit more liberal than other countries. And so industrialization could not have happened earlier because of all the wars. But why didn't it happen later? Why did it happen when it did? Well, the answer that sort of spurred things along can be found in these examples here. Over the course of the years between the 1700s and the 1800s, slave rebellions increased. There were hundreds of slave rebellions across the Caribbean and the Americas. Some of the larger ones on 2 ends of the timeline, the Stono Rebellion in 1739 took place in Carolina. This newspaper photo sort of illustrates a propagandized version of what happened. Enslaved people from the Congo led a rebellion against their white slave owners, slave masters. demanding freedom. And later on, Samuel Sharp, in this picture here, well, he's not in this picture, but Samuel Sharp led a rebellion called the Baptist Rebellion or the Baptist War in Jamaica in the 1800s, where, where's my number? 60,000 enslaved, mostly Asante or Akan African enslaved people, led a rebellion where they burned down several plantations, burned down sugar processing factories, and killed slave owners. This revolt was a demand for better treatment, a demand to be paid for their labor. And what all these slave revolts meant is that the slave labor colonies were less and less profitable. Profits from sugar plantations were going down during this time period, and the British and the French were looking for ways to outcompete each other. This competition between the British and the French actually led to an increase in the price of purchasing captives in Africa as well. And so Britain was looking for new ways to make money that did not use slaves, and they found that answer in industrialization. You should write your 5 summaries and submit them to the Beginnings of Industrialization Summaries assignment in Canvas. And I'll see you again on day 5.